Hey everyone, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee new body, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster battery charge line kit for towed vehicles. Before we get into that though, let's just take a minute, we'll check this out and talk about why it's a good idea to use something like this. A battery charge line kit is a really simple but important component, and it's overlooked a lot of times. And the whole purpose of it is to maintain or essentially trickle charge your Jeep's battery whenever you're flat towing it down the road. And the reason that your battery can get depleted is a couple of reasons. Sometimes just the vehicle's components, factory components, are going to use battery power when it's getting flat towed, and that's not totally uncommon for these late model vehicles because a lot of the systems are all electronic, electric assisted brakes, steering, so on and so forth. Is really popular now in a lot of these cars. And what can happen is your supplemental braking system, whenever that hits the brakes, it takes power from your vehicle's battery. And over time, what can happen, if you're over the road 8-10 hours, whatever the case may be, your battery just gets depleted and depleted and depleted. And then you go to start it up, it might be dead, or really shorten the life expectancy of it. And having the charge line, when you're hooked up to the motorhome and it's pulling your vehicle down the road, with it trickle charging and maintaining that battery, that's just not any issues you're going to have to worry about as far as it being dead or anything like that. The way the kit works is pretty simple. It's going to use a motorhome's 12-volt auxiliary power, and that's where it's going to get the electricity to charge your battery. And so your motorhome is going to need a functional 7-way. All right, which most of the late model ones, going back quite a few years, are going to come with that from the factory. If you've got an older coach that doesn't have a 7-way with that power to it, Roadmaster makes a kit for the motorhome side of things. So just something to look out for there. But that power is going to get sent back through the cable. Your charge line is going to be hooked up to the back of your 6-way connector there, where that power is then going to run up through the wiring, and it's going to go to the circuit breaker, which the circuit breaker is there just to protect that circuit. If a short or something like that were to occur, this would trip and shut power down. But it'll go through there, and we have ours hooked up to our charge post here, which goes right to the battery, and that's how it's going to essentially keep everything maintained. That kind of brings me to my next point. A lot of people wonder about, is this going to affect the motorhome's batteries or anything like that? And the answer is no. The motorhome has its own charging system using the alternator to generate sufficient amperage, and that's exactly what that 12-volt power is for on the back of your 7-ways for a scenario like this. Many other things as well, but you're not going to have to worry about your motorhome's batteries being affected in any negative type of way. There are some other kits available as far as charge lines go. The Roadmaster one we use a lot, and to be honest, I don't know if I've ever ran into any issues with them at all, so definitely a good kit. Another one that I'm a fan of is made by Demco, and I actually have this one on hand here, and they're both going to do the same thing, kind of get the job done. I'm a little bit partial to the Demco one though, honestly, because it just uses a fuse instead of a circuit breaker. I kind of like the thought of that because if something were to happen, this fuse would pop and that's it, right? Until you figure out what's going on and get a new fuse in it. That's where the circuit breaker, it'll trip and then eventually contact again, trip again, and kind of work like that. So I like the idea of the fuse a little bit better, but either way, as long as you got things set up right, you really shouldn't have to worry about anything like that happening to begin with. So, regardless of what kit you go with, you really can't go wrong, and they're both going to keep the battery maintained. Now, as far as the installation goes, really straightforward, especially if you're doing this at the same time as you're doing other components. If you're doing it later, might take a little more time just having to route wires and stuff, but it's not a huge deal. You got that one wire at the front, run it up, mount up your breaker, and go to the battery. So shouldn't really give you too many issues, but if you're going to do this yourself, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our charge line installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Jeep. And we have the front fascia removed, and that's because we're doing this at the same time that we're doing our base plate, which is what I recommend. Got a lot more room to work, but it can be done with the front and back together. Just take a little more time. With that said too, if you're setting everything up at once, think things through. You know, if you're going to be routing wires, think about what else you might have. So for example, it'd be a good time when you're routing wires to do your diode wiring and stuff like that too, which is exactly what I did. But first things first, we can take the bundle of red wire that they give you, and I'm going to drop that down through this opening here where it comes out here, and we can route it towards our mounting location on our base plate. So I have it running along through here, just temporarily zip tied it up for the time being. For our charge line here, I'm going to take the rubber dust cover, slide that over our wire, then I'm going to strip the insulation back. And give it a twist, make sure it's nice and tight. And I might even shorten it up just a little bit. Something like that. And then we can take our connector plug here. And the terminal that we're going to be using will be the one here in the middle. So you just take a Phillips screwdriver, back that set screw out almost all the way. Take the wire, push it into the terminal, and then tighten down the set screw. Back in the engine compartment now, took our wiring and routed it over towards the power source. So just along through here, and this is where it ends. And when you're routing this, you don't have a ton of extra length, so keep that in mind when you're doing this. I strip the end back, you know, cut it to length here where we're going to mount up our breaker. And you can crimp on one of the small ring terminals. So those you just slide on the bare end of the wire and crimp it down. Then we can mount up our breaker. So with this, you want to get it, you know, pretty close to the battery. And I'm going to use the self-tapping screws to run it down. Being that this surface here that we're tapping into is pretty much solid aluminum, might not hurt to pre-drill. That way you don't burn up your self-tappers if you don't have any more. So there's our hole where we started. Run that down a little ways, and that should make things easier. We'll go ahead and remove the nuts from the circuit breaker now. Those will just unthread. And the line running from the front of our vehicle, that's going to go to the gold colored post. And that post is labeled battery, but since essentially the motorhome's acting as our battery, that's why we're hooking it up this way. We'll just snug these down with a 3/8 socket. And then for the rest, right, this is about all I had left here for our wiring. I stripped the ends back, crimped on a small terminal and a large terminal. Small one will go on the silver post. And the other end is going to run to our battery, our power supply, which is right here. So I'm going to just remove this. And what I've actually done, so that's not usually there from the factory, but this is our main power supply. And instead of loosening this nut, since I'll have a bunch of other things I have to hook up as well, So even bothering with that, I just found a nut, a flange nut that has the same thread pitch. And so our ring terminal, we'll put it over that and tighten it down. And if you don't have a nut laying around, you know, it's something you can get at the hardware store, or you can always loosen that up and put the terminal in underneath the factory one and do it that way. Once you get that started, don't forget to come back and snug it down. And if you're done in here, you can reinstall your cover. I'm just going to leave it off for the time being since I have some other components to hook up anyway. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster towed vehicle battery charge line kit on our 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee new body.